Hello guys, and welcome back to the question where you have the questions and I have the answers. And today is a continuation of the Juneteenth slash, I guess, slavery series. I didn't mean for it to go on this long, but I got a comment from this man in the from my last video saying that I was a bunch of topics about slavery and the Atlantic slave trade that I missed. And he was right. I did overlook them, and I didn't know about two of them. One of them I didn't know, and I just plain overlooked. But today we're going to talk about Africa's role in the African slave trade, because as I mentioned in the last video, slavery was common all over the world and people sold each other as slaves because, as much as I hate to admit it, modern economies and booming economies rely on slave labor. Even nowadays, America has slaves and whatever, or a form of modern day slavery. But anyway, this isn't about America, this is about Africa. And so once again, we know that the Africans had slaves. They sold each other as slaves, and there were three types of slaves: ones who were conquered slaves, slaves that other tribes ago, not tribes, I want to say kingdoms, because they had their own economy. I feel like saying tribes is kind of like it promotes that stigma that they were just living in huts and whatever, and very like not advanced, but like they had their own civilization and all this kind of stuff for their own economy and their own everything. So I'm going to say kingdoms or civilizations. So basically, different kingdoms would go out and try and conquer others, or for the purpose of selling slaves to not only the Europeans but also to the Arabs and other Africans. Because even though we only hear about European slave trade because we're in a Eurocentric world in a society, they only really traded with like the sub-Saharan coast because they were too afraid to actually go into the heart of Africa for fear of diseases and so on and so forth, which is funny because mostly, we had more diseases because we didn't have water and whatever, and that's what killed off the news. Anyway, we were afraid of diseases and whatever, and so we didn't go that far in, and by we, I mean white people, the Europeans. And so they're mostly traded with the sub-Saharan coast for trade of firearms and rum. But also, you had the Dutch who would buy slaves from the northern kingdoms of Africa and then trade them with the southern kingdoms of Africa and like South Africa, and that's how they would do their business. And then you also have the northern kingdoms who would conquer others or get slaves and then trade them with and then sell them to the Arabs or the Berbers, which are more African kingdoms, in exchange once again for money, power, or like guns. Okay, but anyway, three types of slaves. One, conquered ones, where you go and you try and conquer their land, or you just capture them to sell them, or whatever, use them for your own purposes. Two was like debting people who were in debt would work as free labor to pay off said debt. Or there were others who were just either born into slavery, like if they were domesticated, if they were like, not say domesticated, but like domestic slaves, they worked at home and they gave birth to someone and that person was a slave. Also, if someone was born and that child was sold into slavery by their parents. Those are the three most common types of slavery. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, well, the Africans were seduced by rum and this kind of stuff into selling people as slaves. But that's where I get to the whole history is very gray. There's no one victim, there's no one oppressor. Everyone is just a medley of morally ambiguous gray soup, It's like the Europeans took thousands, millions, billions of people, of Africans, into slavery. But at the same time, African kingdoms helped supply them with that slavery because they were taking people into slaves. It's not just to say, oh, well, the Africans were always the victims. It's like they were also perpetrating this behavior, because humans are good and humans are bad. And if that's how your economy is set, that was the thing, is that that's not one of the downsides to slavery being so rampant in Africa, is that was kind of their only income. Like that was what they were surviving on, was capturing each other and selling them overseas, or selling them to their neighbors, or selling them to the Arabs. Slavery was what their economy relied on. So when the slave trade became illegal in like the 1800s, they collapsed. You know, because now you have all these enemies because all these people are mad at you for capturing them and selling them to slavery. So now there's infighting among tribes. Now there's infighting among tribes with the addition of alcohol and firearms, which made them, which divided the continent, and it made them way easier to, made them way easier to be conquered by the British and other European forces once again. And that's what we have to think about, is that, is like, why do things happen? And another thing I think is admirable is because the person who commented did comment links to watch to learn about these things. And two of the links were of, I think, the leader of Ghana formally apologizing for the atrocities that his family had committed against other Africans. Selling them into slavery and like, capturing them and treating them harshly, and not even harshly, just brutally. It was estimated that if 100 Africans were captured for slavery in Africa, only 64 of them would make it to the coast to be sold overseas, and by the time they actually got to America or the Caribbeans, only 50 of them would be left because they were treated so harshly, beaten to death or worked to death, or they died on the ship because they were basically starved. They were stuffed on there as stock, not people, so they weren't given a lot of food. They wouldn't be able to see sunlight. They couldn't go up and move unless they wanted entertainment. Then they were forced to dance for their white captors. And it was horrible. Women were raped. Once again, this isn't just the white people. This is everyone, because everyone always feels that there's at least one person to be. We go and divide ourselves when we think, oh, we are this people and they are them. And because they are them and they're not us, they're inferior to us. And we can do whatever we want with them because they either don't deserve the same respect as we do, or because something has made them inferior to us in a way and they won't understand it, and therefore we can do this to them. That's usually the thought process, and once again, that's not like a white person thought. We perpetuate it the most, definitely, but everybody has those thoughts. There's discrimination against everyone and everything, and that's horrible, and it sucks. But sadly, our history, not just white history and American history, every history is made off of it. I mean, there's still slavery going on now. There was still slavery in Africa, going on now, and going on, like, in Ethiopia. Slavery wasn't outlawed until 1942. The slave trade going on in Nigeria, and up until 1936. In Libya, there's still the slave trade going on there, and children witness abuse every day. I think the worst thing is, once again, the narrative and the way we teach about slavery is really bad just for American narratives in general, because we go, and that's the thing. The leader of Ghana, he can apologize and recognize that what happened was bad. We can recognize it happened. In America, there's still people who deny that it's happening, or deny that it was bad, or even think that we still need slavery. I'm not saying that people like that aren't in Africa too. I'm pretty sure people suck all over the world. But, like, at least their leader is going out and recognizing the history and condemning it and trying to work towards a better future, whereas our country is more focused on deleting an app than fixing police brutality and rampant racism. So this wasn't as neatly done as a few of my past other videos. It was more of a rant because people suck. But we need to better educate ourselves. Our education about everything needs to be better. We need to stop learning about just our country's history and learn about every history. History is taken for granted so often, not only in my country, but I'm thinking a lot of others as well. My stepdad didn't know that there were slaves in Canada, that Canada even had slaves. And he's lived there his whole life. And so if people don't know their own history, then we're obviously doomed to repeat it, or we're doomed to ignorance, or doomed to perpetuate this false narrative that it never happened. We learned about, how England perpetuated the slave trade. Not even that. We just learned about the Civil War and that was it. And I think the most we know outside of the Civil War was that, oh, Thomas Jefferson had slaves, a few presidents had slaves, but the majority of the presidents had slaves, and more of our policies were around keeping slavery intact. And that America still has a form of modern day slavery, and a lot of countries do, because once again, powerful economies rely on a form of slave labor, and it's awful. And we need to change that narrative that, one, everything is centered around white people. We need to change that, definitely, because other countries have just as rich and fascinating histories as we do, and it'll benefit us more as people and as global leaders to learn about our brothers and sisters in race and in ethnicity, in religion, and in geography. And end the narrative that slavery was a thing of the past, because it's still going on in ancient forms of actual capturing and whatever in slavery, but also of legal slavery. We need to work to fight against this thing. We can't just say, oh, this one thing was happened, now it's over. Like with civil rights movement, segregation was banned, and then we were kind of like, oh, racism is over, but it's not. And it's not. And then, and that's the thing that's so special about the BLM movement, is that we had the officers arrested, and Brianna's law was passed, but we're still going because we recognize that we're not going to take these quick and simple fixes. This is for a big system. This is for something bigger. And we need to fight for that, not just for our country, but for every country, because every country is feeling it right now. And we need to learn the history and help where they haven't been helped before. I'm sorry if this was like not as helpful, as informative as I thought it would be. It's really frustrating how ignorant people can be, and how ignorant we let ourselves be, because we blindly trust that people will tell us what we need, or that what we hear in school is true, because we're taught to trust these things, we're told to trust these things, and we don't know any different. We're told that our country is the greatest and that we have a great education system, but all of our history is a lie, and it's redacted to make us look like the good guys. And then sometimes when there's an overwhelming thing that we can't help but know is wrong, we water it down to the point of, oh, it doesn't matter, it's all in the past. When no, everything is in the past. Everything that's happened in history has very relevant consequences that have led us to where we are today. Redlining is gone, but the inequality and the poverty difference is still there. It's like slavery ended, but we didn't even give a shit about how it dismantled different, like multiple kingdoms in Africa, which led us to that, which led it to the easy takeover of European powers. We go and say, oh, well, these people, it's just like with Iran and the Middle East, we dismantle their government, we topple their economic system, and then we call them savages and dumb and chaotic and barbaric, even though we made them that way. I mean, they also made themselves that way a little bit, with helping with the slave trade, but not with the whole Iran thing. You know, we shouldn't have been perpetuating slavery. Slavery should not have been a thing, but it was. And the fact that we just said, oh, ending it, that's the easiest thing to do, that's what we're going to do, that's the right thing to do. But then we didn't try and go back and fix all the damages that slavery and then abruptly ending slavery caused. And same thing with tourism. Countries and counties and whatever depend on these things to live. Once that thing is taken away, once that mean of making money is taken away, then they're broke. They're nothing. They're basically just shambles of a country, of a civilization. And then we condemn them for not knowing what to do because they depended on that and we took it away from them. So in conclusion, the African slave trade, and Africa did have a role in the slave trade, and it was brutal. And in the end, they paid for it. But also, there's still countries with slavery today, and we really need to work to stop that. And not only stop it by ending slavery, but also help bring the country and help the country depend on something other than slavery. I think it's the things that we end slavery, but we don't know what to do economics wise without it. So we just find ways to, we found loopholes to legalize it again. And that's what America did, and it's probably what a lot of other countries do too. So we need to think of a way that we can be economically independent of slave labor. And only then can slavery truly be in the past, is when it's over and there are no more loopholes that we can exploit. Have a nice day. I love you all. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.